is Totally 80s, the podcast dedicated to the music of the greatest decade ever. So, turn up your Walkman, loosen that scrunchie, and get ready to talk 80s with your host, Lyndsey Parker.
Hi, I'm Lyndsey Parker from Yahoo Entertainment and SiriusXM Volume, and welcome to Totally 80s. And since we're all at home, why not take a second to follow us at Totally 80s on Facebook and Instagram, or email us your comments and show ideas to us at podcast@totally80s.com. As a reminder, if you want to see our lovely faces, you can catch this episode on video as well as on our Totally 80s YouTube channel, so check that out. And joining me today, as always, is my partner in all things 80s crime, the other John Hughes.
Hey, Lyndsey, what's going on?
Well, I've been going down a YouTube rabbit hole because, we're all in lockdown and there's not much else to do, but that has inspired the podcast we're going to talk about because YouTube is a gold mine of 80s television. And today we are going to be talking about our favorite musician guest spots on 80s TV shows like DEVO on Square Pegs, Stacey Q on The Facts of Life, of course, Boy George on the A-Team. I feel like we could devote almost an entire podcast to just that alone. But I'm real excited because, you remember when we were kids, when we were rounded up by the TV sets, ethereal glow with our cereal, and how much our minds would be blown when, the worlds collide. And I know I'm making a 70s reference here, but Davy Jones would just randomly show up on the Brady Bunch. And you're like, what? Davy Jones and Marshall Brady know each other? Like, how? This happened a lot in the 80s. It happened a lot on a show that actually I think we could probably dedicate an entire podcast to. We won't, except in my own brain, but Square Pegs. It was a totally different head, John. Totally
different head. Johnny Slash, new wave punk, totally different head. Totally.
So I am Jewish on my mother's side. I'm a good half Jew. And I'll tell you this is not a lie. The reason I had a bat mitzvah was because of Square Pegs. Because I was really wanting to have my full Muffy Tepperman fantasy. Sadly, DEVO did not play. DEVO did not play at my bat mitzvah, just like Josie Cotton did not play at my prom. Everything that I saw on the screen was not how it really was in the Valley. But I swear, I bet you that episode made people want to convert to Judaism.
Well, yeah, it was interesting because they were the second really popular new wave band to be on Square Pegs because, the debut episode had the waitresses.
My life is over. I might as well dance with Johnny Slash.
Always never quite right. I like it if they like us, but I don't think they like us.
We did the theme song.
Yeah, so that was cool. But yeah, the bat mitzvah was amazing. And, the interesting thing for me as a devotee is that they were in their oh no, it's DEVO era Spud uniforms with the potato white rings as opposed to the freedom of choice red helmets that they were so well known for. So I've always wondered if there was some executive at CBS that saw this filming and went, how come they're not wearing the red hats? That's what people know them for.
And DEVO plays for Muffy's party, but Lauren, Patty, and Johnny Slash aren't invited because they're Square Pegs.
Well, it was a bit later, right? They did That's Good. So it's semi-later period DEVO. But I have some fun facts because I interviewed Ann Beats and the music supervisor, Stephen Elvis Smith, when the anniversary of one of the darkest days in TV history happened, the day Square Pegs got officially canceled, which CBS really made a mistake there. But I did this big piece on all the music that was in Square Pegs. So here are some fun facts. The original band that was supposed to play Muffy Tepperman, a.k.a. Jamie Gertz's bat mitzvah, was The Clash. Not DEVO, was The Clash. So Ann Beats, who, she was hip. She was one of the original Saturday Night Live writers. She knew all these people. Mick Jones wanted to do it.
Wow.
But could not convince Joe Strummer to do it, right? So Joe Strummer made a mistake. But, it all worked out because I feel like who would be more fun to have play your bat mitzvah, DEVO or The Clash? I feel like DEVO is more like the party band to, bring the costumes and the sense of whimsy, as it were.
Better visually too for the show, I think, because they're just such a visually focused band, a video forward band.
But DEVO were not the second choice either, John.
Oh.
So after the Clash weren't going to do it, this one would have really not worked. Boomtown Rats were asked.
Oh, that's funny because they had just been on SCTV at that point, doing Teacher's Pet, which I will spare you my rendition of that theme song from that classic sketch.
I actually wouldn't stop you.
It's the best. It's Andrea Martin as the student singing this kind of fake "To Sir with Love" song called Teacher's Pet. It's amazing.
Mr. Zachary, is a small token of our appreciation for what you might have done if you'd been able to stay around here with us. We'd like to give you this cookie.
Cookie? Oh, she's a beautiful woman, but I...
Teacher's pet, I wanna be teacher's pet. I wanna be huddled and cuddled as close to you as I can get. Teacher's pet.
But, yeah, Bob Geldof was in a sketch on SCTV, like a long sketch, and was really good. And if you look at the DVD commentaries and listen to it, Catherine O'Hara was completely in love with him. She's the one that got them on the show.
Wow. So then they couldn't do it, which I think had to do with some scheduling thing. So then there was a CBS executive, maybe the same one who was mad that they didn't wear their red hats. I don't know. His name was Harvey Shepard, but he had a daughter who was young enough to be into new wave because it was a totally different head, totally. So he said, like, who should I book? Like, who's a good band to do this? She's like, she happened to be a fan of DEVO, but DEVO almost didn't do it. There was, I think Jerry was not into it, and there was like a last minute thing, and they were going to back out the last minute, but it all happened and it all worked out. And I think that's like the holy grail of 80s new wave television. But that was just the tip of the iceberg with the cameos that happened on Square Pegs, because we're going back to bands that aren't from the 80s, but John Densmore from The Doors was on it as well. Do you remember that?
I do. That was a very, very strange cameo.
So it was a band by Johnny Slash that was originally called Open 24 Hours. And then because they just wanted to up the ante and be a little bit extra, they became Open 48 Hours. And they actually had a couple good songs. They had John Densmore actually playing the drums, and they had a song called I'm Tired.
1, 2, 3. I don't mean to irritate or alienate, but people don't appreciate the fact I don't communicate because I'm tired.
Some people say he's lazy, some people think he's crazy.
Really
while
tired.
others understand why he prefers his nice few days.
So
If you ask him to
tired.
explain his way, he'll lead you down in pain and say,
I'm totally tired.
And a song called Get Back to Me. And I found out in this piece I did from Square Pegs that one of the people that wrote the song, Jonathan Wolfe, ended up writing a lot of the music for Seinfeld. You know, that like famous, like, don't, like, I can't do it. But you know, the bass
That
from
bass line probably bought him a house.
pretty much. I don't think I'm Tired and Get Back to Me by Open 48 Hours probably did, but that's the superior song, I think. But my mind was blown to go back to the fact that there were all these things that were supposed to happen on Square Peg. The Clash were bowed out, that the Boomtown Rats bowed out. I don't know if you remember that Jimmy and the Mustangs, this kind of like small rockabilly band, was on. That was supposed to be the Stray Cats.
Oh.
And like Slim Jim this is the thing. Always someone didn't want to do it. From what I hear, Slim Jim Phantom wanted to do it. Brian Setzer did not. But then this is the part that breaks my heart, John. Breaks my damn heart. Stephen Elvis Smith told me that there were 3 artists that were on the rise that he tried to convince Ann Beats and other people from the show that they should book. And they said no. And those were Wham. Wham could have been on Square Pegs. Madonna. He was like, hey, check out this Madonna chick. She's going to be big. Madonna. I think that would have absolutely fit. And then the last one that didn't happen, but don't worry, where one door closes, another door opens, was Culture Club.
Oh.
So Culture Club did not end up on Square Pegs, but they found a few years later, in the great year of the year of our Lord, 1986, probably maybe the most bizarre cameo we'll talk about is Boy George on the A-Team. What are your thoughts on that one, John?
Well, it's late period culture club, which fascinates me. That whole from luxury to heartache, move away era, spiky
Sexuality
Yeah.
was from that era. Yeah, that was a
Right.
good song actually.
His long spiky hairdo, where he kind of butched it up a little bit. I don't know if
Which
that was his choice.
he was butched by Boy George standards, which
Right.
made it a perfect casting for him to be Cowboy George. He was the original Orville Peck. So
Yeah.
from what I understand, from my fuzzy memories, and they're still fuzzy, even though I looked it all up on YouTube right before this, because it's just like I'm still trying to compute that this actually happened. So there's some kind of plot where he's a country performer, like I said, the proto Orville Peck, Cowboy George, and he's performing in it's very reminiscent of like the Blues Brothers scene of them performing behind the chicken wire, or like, the Sex Pistols performing in the South or something, except everyone likes it when Boy George and Culture Club start performing Karma Chameleon in this like cowboy dive bar. But what's great is the acting in it, because Boy George is like forced to say things like all sort of things he wouldn't say, like in his Boy George voice. Like he's like, "Go for it, Hannibal," and like, "Awesome, Mr. T." And there's one like sassy moment where they're walking away and they go, "We're the A-team." And Boy George goes, "So there." So there. Ooh, Boy George just put me in my place. So there. And
I remember for some reason they were really hyping this episode like it was going to be a huge ratings grabber. There was an ad and TV guide with Boy George and Mr. T, and it's like they were kind of on the downslide at that point, weren't they?
Yeah, this is like a couple years after the war song. This is a couple years after mistake number 3. This show was like mistake number 4, but I watched it. I'm going to say I tuned in. But yeah, I think I saw, I told you I went down a YouTube rabbit hole. Not only did I watch all of the YouTube, whatever I could find of this appearance, but I did also watch the Conan O'Brien interview that Boy George did around the time that Take It Like a Man, his autobiography, came out, where he talked about it. And he basically said he was paid like $100,000 to do it, which actually doesn't sound like that much money considering how big Culture Club were. But by 1986, and Boy George having the habits that he did, I guess 100, and things were falling apart. I'm actually surprised that all of them were even on the show. Were Culture Club still together in 86? I guess they were.
Yeah,
but
just
he got
by a thread at that point.
But he got paid, and we have now a moment that someone needs to make a GIF of, or GIF of. I say GIF. I don't care. It's GIF. I'm sorry. We don't have time to go into that debate, but it's a GIF of Mr. T sitting in the dive bar, like kind of grooving to Karma Chameleon, which had come out 3. That's the other thing. That's a good point, John. They're doing a song that was like 3 or 4 years old.
That's an executive stepping in. I can tell you that right now. That that is either a record label executive or it is a TV executive saying, "You got to do the song everybody knows before. You can't do that move away tune."
I think it would have been really cool if they were in the cowboy dive bar with all the rednecks with all their beers and whiskey, and they were singing Sexuality. Play with my sexuality. That was the jam from Culture Club from 1986. That would have been a great move. But, Cowboy George, maybe we'll get an album one day from Cowboy George. I don't think it would be a bad idea, actually.
Maybe Marilyn will be on the Equalizer.
Marilyn wasn't on the Equalizer, but Adam Ant was on the Equalizer.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I do. And that was a big deal. That, and that was it. Debbie Harry on Wise Guy.
Mm-hmm.
Those were just kind of like the two, stabs for, acting acceptance, and Adam Ant, again, trying to pivot, I think, because that was 85, 86 after Viva Rock. Yeah. Like, okay, the music thing is, despite a great album from Tony Visconti producing Viva la Rock. I love that record.
Do you like the whole record? Do you like that song?
I love the whole record.
All right.
Sorry.
Did that have Room at the Top on it as well?
No, that's Manners and Physique in 1989. That's after everything didn't work out. Anyway,
we'll save it for our Adam and the Ant or Malcolm. Let's do a Malcolm McLaren podcast. I would be into that. But back to the Equalizer. Did you know that Stuart Copeland and Ad Rock from Beastie Boys, not together, separately, were both on that show? That show was very fuzzy on my radar, but apparently they had some cool guests.
That show and Wise Guy, they did a lot of stunt casting like that for, you know, these limited runs where they would come on and do 3 or 4 episodes as a character, and they would always try to get either a rock musician or someone who normally wasn't known for doing TV or those kind of things. And it was interesting. You know, Debbie Harry had a lot of experience acting. Can we not forget Videodrome? Come on.
I won't. I have not forgotten Videodrome.
And, you know, to see her was not that big a surprise on Wise Guy. It was a surprise, you know, the time period, because, again, a dry period for her in music. You know, Deaf, Dumb, and Blonde isn't exactly storming up the charts. And,
But do you know what show? Forget about The Equalizer. Do you know what show was like the Coachella of 80s cameos? Basically the cameo-cella, if you will. Miami Vice, which makes sense because that show was basically, it pretty much every week looked like an hour-long 80s music video. It was very like jump cuts and pastel colors and fashion. And if there's any moment that we need to focus on, it was great that Frank Zappa was on. That was cool. Phil Collins was actually amazing on it as Phil the Shill, playing like, he should get a retroactive Emmy for his like sleazy, slimy game show host that he's on. And there's a whole montage scene of him just being badass, like swilling champagne with models and like, you know, living it up on yachts, but he's Phil Collins and he looks like Phil Collins. That was good. There was a whole like story arc where Sheena Easton played Sonny Crockett's wife, and she like dies in his arms, Cutting Crew style.
Right, she gets killed.
She gets shot. It was a very special episode of Miami Vice. Pour some out for Caitlin Davies. That was her name, and she played herself. It was, and she also, or she played a version of herself. She played a pop star, and there was like a whole payola scandal in it. But if there's one moment in Miami Vice history that we must concentrate on, the power station we're on. Did you watch? Have you not seen it?
I have seen it retroactively. I did not see it. And in fact, I actively boycotted it because
you're a Robert Palmer fan. Team Robert Palmer?
Right. Not my power station.
Sorry, Michael DeBar, if you're listening. He's a friend. But
I
you would not have.
I love Spider. I love Michael DeBar, but power station is Robert Palmer.
You would not like this episode then, because so John Taylor, who, by the way, you know I love John Taylor very much. Acting is not so much his strong. Great bass player. Good looking guy. Nice guy. Not the best actor, at least not in this scene where he is playing himself not well. But there's a scene where he's talking to Crockett, and, you know, Michael DeBar is there in like a kimono with a perm and no shirt on, being his Michael DeBar self. And John Taylor.
Anything else?
Oh, he sells it. He sells it, but John Taylor turns to Crockett, who I guess in this, you know, the story, the narrative is that they're supposed to be old friends. And he says, and I quote, "We just got a new singer. You'll never notice the difference."
You look so relaxed.
Nothing ever changes, JT.
Well, that's not true. We just got a new singer. You never notice the difference.
Hey, dude.
That's a burn. That's a burn. Were they like on the outs with Robert Palmer? Were they pissed with it?
They weren't happy with them. Yeah, they had a whole tour planned and he pulled out. And not only that, I mean, if you look at it, I don't know if this is the case, but it just from outside looking in, not only does he pull out of this tour, he releases Riptide, which is an album that sounds exactly like the Power Station, you know.
And he pulled out right before Live Aid, which quite famously, as we've discussed on our Feeling Charitable podcast, that everybody can listen to, that was Michael DeBar's first. He had to, like, you know, jump into the deep end and fill the role right then. So he's on Power Station with them. And so John gets that little like bit of shade in there. He gets that burn. And then they perform, and Andy's all sweaty. And like I say, Michael DeBar is wearing no shirt, but he's wearing like a dressing gown, and his hair is increasingly getting smaller as he performs because it's like obviously very sweaty in there. And then a fist fight breaks out. In the middle of them doing Get It On. And John Taylor looks and, you know, with amusement at this fist fight, because obviously it's under control because Crockett and Tubbs, they got stuff under control. Right. And he goes, "Oh, Crockett, nothing ever changes with you." Ha ha. As they're still playing. And like I said, not the best acting job, but it's just classic. It's classic. But maybe now that you've had some distance, you know, I don't think it would be disrespectful to Robert Palmer's legacy to watch it now. But and this is not disrespectful to Michael DeBar at all, who is not only a friend of mine, but is someone who I think is a very good singer. But when he replaced Robert Palmer in Power Station, I mean, you did notice the difference.
Oh, yeah. It would be an insult to Michael DeBar to not put your own stamp on it. You know, why wouldn't you try to be something? If he tried to imitate Robert Palmer, he'd get crucified. So no, it's good that he was himself. Just not my Power Station. The funny thing about Miami Vice and Guess is you have this Ouroboros of meta when you have Glenn Frey doing Smuggler's Blues, which is a Miami Vice like video and song, and then he gets invited to be on the show, and then own Miami Vice like show that gets canceled after one episode. Poor guy.
He had his own show, Glenn Frey.
Oh yeah, it was called.
What was it called?
South by Sunset, I think is what it was called, and he was a private detective or something, and it aired once, and they canceled it the next day. Was
it? I assume it was bad. Did you see it?
I never saw it. It was one of those things that, they just cut their losses. Some of those articles you read sometimes about shows that got canceled after one airing, that one is always on it. And if poor Glenn Frey.
I missed that during my YouTube rabbit holing, but I'm going to watch it after this. I did actually forget that, another stunt casting on Miami Vice was Ted Nugent was on. Do you remember that one?
No, I don't.
He played a more sane version of himself. It was actually his screen acting debut. He played a con artist named Charlie Bassett, who, along with his wife, they kill drug buyers, take their money, and bury them in mile-high sand. And Little Miss Dangerous appeared in one of the episodes. He was in a couple episodes. He was in more than one, and probably less crazy than the real version of Ted Nugent.
Yeah,
now that I think about it.
We got to give Miami Vice credit for doing that musician stunt casting that obviously influenced Equalizer and Wise Guys we were talking about earlier. Miami Vice did it first and did it well. They got Frank Zappa.
Yeah, and Frank Zappa also not a great actor. Have you seen his scene? He plays like a drug lord on a yacht for some reason, and I'm not sure where he's supposed to be from. But he doesn't sound like he's supposed to be American. He has some kind of weird accent, and it sounds like he's reading cue cards or a teleprompter the entire time.
I once had a trusted employee, a man named Maroto, who was moving some weasel dust for me. He too was in a hurry. After years of faithful service, he hurried away with $3 million of my favorite dollars.
Did nobody see him host SNL in the 70s and realize this is what they were going to get? I mean, that episode was infamous for him. I think it was a defense mechanism. I think he got up there and was a little more nervous than he thought he was going to be. And so it was like, okay, I'm going to look like an idiot. So if I really try to make it obvious that I'm reading the cue cards, I'll get away with this. And it just didn't work.
Well, when we're talking about WTF moments on TV, yes, Ted Nugent and Power Station on Miami Vice, that's a little bit. And certainly Boy George and the A-Team is a lot of it. But maybe the weirdest one that we'll talk about now that I think about it is when the B-52s were on Guiding Light.
I loved it.
How did that happen? Do you know? Like,
no idea how it happened.
Guiding Light was a B-52s fan, and they had to be a fan because they did a song on it that was not a single. They didn't just do Private Idaho. They also did Throw That Beat in the Garbage Can, which is not a single.
From Mesopotamia. I mean,
yeah.
It's like, what?
Here it comes again. Driving me nuts. Can't control my speed or stop shaking my butt. The neighbors are complaining. It's getting out of hand. Throw that beat in the garbage can.
And my mom was the biggest Guiding Light fan. It was on every day at our house at 3:00, which, sucked because so was the Spider-Man cartoon at 3:30 on Channel 43. Not that I remember these things. So I'm like watching, I want to believe the characters are named Sunny. There was a character named Sunny or someone else that Sunny was in love with. And they were the kids on the show,
Okay.
the young kids that they can after school trying to get those ratings. And they're up against General Hospital. And they have this
who had Rick Springfield on at the time, who
Right.
was living a double life as a huge pop star at the time.
Yeah, and a surgeon, a successful surgeon.
Multitasker. Is there anything Rick Springfield can't do?
I know, but there was like this club, this new wave club on the Guiding Light, where all the kids hung out and the adults. Like you'd see like the 50-year-old couples that had been on the show since the 1960s hanging out at this club, and the B-52s were on. And I remember I was probably a freshman or a sophomore in high school, and I'm like, Mom, the B-52s are on the Guiding Light. My mom's like, what are they talking about? What are they singing? She was like, and that man is so strange. And I'm like, bopping in front of the TV, like, this is the greatest thing ever.
It's funny that your mom thought that it was strange, because I watched it again to prepare for this. I had a wonderful time preparing for this. This was the best idea ever. I just spent like an afternoon watching stuff on YouTube. And Fred Schneider definitely was toning it down for the Guiding Light. He's wearing like a sensible button-down shirt.
Yeah.
He's definitely toning it down. The name of the club, if I'm not mistaken, was called Wired for Sound.
Thank you. Yes.
Which is actually a really bitchin' name for a club. And the guy who introduces them, I was not a Guiding Light fan. I was more a Young and the Restless fan. So I was watching Michael Damian singing David Essex covers on Young and the Restless while you were watching the B-52s on the Guiding Light. But and that was great too. Actually, this could almost be a whole podcast, the crossover between pop and soap operas in the 80s between Michael Damian and Jack Wagner and all of this stuff. But anyway, to go back to Wired for Sound, whoever's introducing him, he says they are one of the most innovative rock groups who are now riding the crest of the new wave. I'm like, wow, someone who was working for the Guiding Light was a real fan. And I just love the fact that there were, I'm not saying your mother was one of these, but there were all these housewives with like, I don't know what housewives were doing in 1982. They're Harvey Wallbangers or they're lewds. What were the Dexatrim, whatever they were taking in 1982?
Dexatrim and vodka.
Yeah, they've got their Dexatrim and vodka cocktails. It's 3 p.m. Right. And all of a sudden the B-52s come on and do Throw That Beat in the Garbage Can. I bet you there's a lot of people like yourself, like you were already wise to the B-52s, but I bet you there were some people that were turned on to them because that was about as like mainstream, unhip as it could get, a soap opera audience in the middle of the day.
I have to wonder what Sire Records' plan was if they were involved. It was like, we're going to get those housewives into Camelot music asking for the Mesopotamia.
Do you have the vinyl of Throw That Beat in the Garbage Can?
We were on Guiding Light. And by the way, I was wrong. Sonny was from General Hospital. Philip
I'm sorry. I was very loyal to Young and the Restless. That was the only one I watched. But Michael Damian, he had an actual career and that's how I got introduced to David Essex, but that's another story. Let's move back to primetime, because there were a few feel-good, family-friendly sitcoms at the time that welcomed pop stars, and Facts of Life was one of them. I remember Cinnamon, aka Stacey Q. She won both of our hearts, our two of hearts, when she appeared as Cinnamon on the episode that I just looked up was called Off-Broadway Baby. She's basically playing a version of herself. And then there was a second episode that was called A Star Is Torn. She did Two of Hearts and We Connect. But here's a fun fact about the second episode, A Star Is Torn. So a lot of people laugh about the fact that George Clooney was on the show. Long before George Clooney was George Clooney and he was, the mega star that he is now. He played this kind of like, I don't know, I forget the character's name, but like kind of like a handyman, I guess, kind of like a random guy who's like hanging out at this girls' school all the time, and it's totally fine and nothing's wrong, nothing weird about that. And he leaves the show. The way they wrote his character off the show is he leaves to join Cinnamon's tour as a roadie.
Oh, wow.
So now we know what happened.
Was there an episode where this may be a complete fabricated memory in my head where Cinnamon stole a song from Tootie?
I want to believe that happened. I don't know.
I believe there was Tootie wrote a song, just happened to be Two of Hearts, I believe, this great hit. And Cinnamon was like auditioning for Broadway or a musical or something, and she used Tootie's song for the audition, and Tootie was all torn up about it. I remember it was the Cloris Leachman era. It was not the Edna Garrett.
Yeah. I started to drop off in the Cloris Leachman era, to be honest. When they were like 30 years old and they still were like living together in like a dorm, but they all had jobs. It was like, come on. And they started to like introduce like Mackenzie Aston, like all these like cute kids, and George Clooney probably was someone that they tried to do. It was tough. I can see why George Clooney thought like life as Cinnamon's roadie was going to be a more glamorous existence than
he had to get away from the four most codependent people on the face of the earth. That, you know, high school's over, girls. Let's move on.
No, we're all going to go to like Langley University 1 block away and keep it going. But
work at Edna's Edibles.
Edna's Edibles. It's really funny. It was called Edna's Edibles because now imagine what people would think that business is. Well, maybe they were on some edibles, but Tootie got her revenge, or at least she got another chance in the business when El DeBarge came on the show singing the bop of the year, You Wear It Well. And apparently, I never knew this, but Blair, Joe, Nally, and of course Tootie sang backup on that single, or at least they did according to this episode of The Facts of Life. And it, you know, I'm just bringing you the facts of life. You take the good, you take the bad. You have these random like kids from Langley University sing on your song. I don't know. I don't remember this episode. I could just find the musical version on, you know, YouTube. So I don't know exactly how they ended up in the studio with El DeBarge. I don't know. Do you remember?
I don't, but I can tell you all that scene without even seeing it. I know exactly what it is. It's nothing but mullets, shoulder pads, and relaxer. That's all I can see.
Hopefully there'll be an uptick for Spotify streams and other streams for El DeBarge. Now we've talked not just about his star turn on The Facts of Life, but do you remember when all of the DeBarge members were on Punky Brewster?
No. Did they get trapped in a refrigerator?
They do not. They appear in her apartment for some reason singing. I can, like, again, I'm just piecing this together from what I could find online. And there's like, do you remember like when people would sing on TV shows, on sitcoms, and they have like no microphones or amps or any kind of equipment for miles around, yet somehow they're singing with these like amplified voices with like piles of reverb on them? That's what happened. I did look up the description of this episode on IMDb, and it is thus. Punky wants to see the rock group. It says rock. I'm just reading it. This is what IMDb says. Maybe there's another rock group called DeBarge that I'm unaware of. Punky wants to see the rock group DeBarge in concert, but Henry is more concerned with her education. Doesn't he know the best education she can have is having DeBarge serenade her randomly with amplified voices coming out of nowhere in the middle of her apartment? That's the school of rock, school of life. Doesn't get better than that.
That's crazy. You know, not only you got them, DeBarge on Punky Brewster, Adam Gibb on Punky Brewster.
Andy Gibb. That you said Adam Gibb just now. Didn't you?
Adam Gibb? Andy Gibb.
Enunciate that, because put some respect on his name. He was my first celebrity crush. My absolute first. And I actually watched that episode or that scene also in my YouTube excavating, and I teared up because, you know, he was my first crush. You know, had posters on him in my wall when I was like literally 6 or 7 years old. My first memory, besides Davy Jones, because I liked him in reruns, my first memory of liking someone in real time, so to speak, like liking someone and knowing that they, well, I guess at age 7 they really weren't like eligible, but I thought they were, was Andy.
It's amazing because now you think about it. At the time when he died, it was like, oh, that's sad. And you think about it now, he was only 30 years old, which was like an old man when we were kids. And now we were like, wow, he was so young.
So when he appeared on Punky Brewster, he was 26. It was 4 years before he died. And he played Punky's piano teacher. And obviously his career, you know, you and I on the TV, another TV related episode about like variety shows and stuff, we talked about Solid Gold. He had done that. He'd hosted Solid Gold. He'd done like Pirates of Penzance. He'd done a bunch of things. He obviously had had a problem with drugs, and his career was definitely, you know, kind of washed up, I guess, for lack of a nicer way to put it. So he ended up playing Punky's piano teacher on in this 1984 episode. And it is magical. He's sitting there. The scene I saw, he's playing a song for her on the piano. And I forget the name of the song, but it's a song from 1981 that he originally released with Olivia Newton-John. You might know what it is. I think it's called Think About.
I Can't Help It?
Yes, it's I Can't Help It. Thank you.
There you go. Mm-hmm.
So he's doing I Can't Help It, just him and a piano. Punky, understandably, is looking at him with saucer-sized eyes of love. Like, she is in love, and who can blame her? But he sounds beautiful. It's a very tender performance, but there's this moment, the dog, her dog, and Henry, her guardian, are in the kitchen, and she's in the living room listening to Andy perform. And they perk up like, wow, that sounds really nice. And there's like, one of those dog doors in the kitchen, and the dog comes out through the door and sits down and like watches. Like, he's like, oh, the dog is like, let me check this out. And then like Henry like pokes his head through like, the top of the door. It's one of those split doors. And it's really nice. I know it might sound like, oh, remember when Andy Gibb was on Punky Pursuit? It's really nice. Everybody should really check it out because he was really talented. And at that point, he'd been reduced to like a cameo on this like children's sitcom. And, he hadn't had a hit in many years. And probably a lot of people had written him off, understandably had written him off. But God, he sounded so nice. And I know that Salome Fry has talked about in interviews how like all the little girls on the set, all the little kid actresses were just like adored him and just were falling over him. It's a really nice moment.
Am I wasting my time hanging around? You would be gone, but I can't help it. Every moment that I think about you, every day and every night without you, I can't survive.
So
poignant moment. So I'm going to follow that up with something just completely ridiculous.
Cool. Awesome. We got to have the best of both worlds.
I can't think of a way to match that in poignancy. You know me, I go deep. Laura Branigan on Automan.
What? Automan? What's that? I don't even remember the show.
Weird show that was like Knight Rider meets Tron, about a guy who could Transformers before Transformers. He like had the power to turn into an automobile almost.
What?
I didn't write it. I didn't greenlight it. NBC, throwing anything at the wall in the 80s. Laura Branigan on it. Not only does Gloria, but 2 other songs. She does, Hot Night and Satisfaction, 2 of the other great Laura Branigan deep album cuts. I don't know.
There's nothing about the sentences you just said that I didn't like.
You read me, Jack?
Yeah, I got you, Walter. Everything cool?
Roger. Everything's okay.
Did Automan last longer than the Glenn Fry show? Like, yeah, I've never heard of the show in my life.
It didn't make it longer than 1 episode. So Automan's got that on Glenn Fry. Poor Glenn.
I thought I had watched everything on YouTube that there was to watch, but I have a little bit of homework now. Okay. I do want to, I know this is a totally 80s podcast, but before we sign off, I just want to give some honorable mentions to the late 70s TV shows that paved the way for Boy George on the A-Team and Laura Branigan on Automan, because they deserve credit. One would be, speaking of Michael DeBar, the WKRP Scums of the Earth episode. Yes. As a journalist, as someone who's interviewed people, particularly on live settings like radio or Facebook Live, that's my ultimate worst nightmare, the way that radio interview goes, where like they're just being total dicks. And then there's that moment where they're off camera. Is it Venus Flytrap or Johnny Fever who interviews them?
I think it's Johnny Fever, right?
Yeah, I think it's Johnny Fever. But during the radio break, and by the way, they're playing detective songs, like the Scums of the Earth songs are detective. He says, guys, we're tanking here. This interview is going so bad. Like, give me something to work with. Come on. Because they were giving him nothing. And Michael goes, okay, or not Michael, but Dog, his character in the dog collar and suit, says, ask me about my classical training. And Johnny Fever goes, okay, great, thanks. So they come back on. And he goes, well, we're back with Scums of the Earth. Tell me about your classical training. And Michael goes, I have none. Like he was just effing with him. So good. So that one, Leather and the Suede, A.K. Leather, Tuscadero from Happy Days. Yeah. Susie, do you know that there was supposed to be, I've actually just interviewed Susie Quattro this week because she has that new documentary, Susie Q, that came out. Do you know that there was supposed to be a Leather Tuscadero spinoff? I would have watched the hell out of that. But she knew if she did that, she would be Leather Tuscadero for life, much as David Cassidy was Keith Partridge for life.
Yep.
So maybe wisely in hindsight. But God, I would have loved a Leather. That's like my first time I saw a chick rock out was Happy Days.
Yeah. It should have been the Joni Loves Chachi spinoff instead.
I hope people listening to this learned a lot because, we're all in quarantine. So we gave you some ideas of things to watch on YouTube. I can say from very personal experience that watching all this stuff on YouTube is a great way to pass the time. So that's all the time we have now. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I am Lyndsey Parker. I've been joined today by the other John Hughes, and we want to thank you for listening. Remember to give us a rate and review on your favorite podcast platform, and we'll catch you next time.
This was Totally 80s, the podcast dedicated to the music of the greatest decade ever. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Totally 80s, and please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Until our next episode, catch you on the flip side.